At any given moment in your life, you are choosing between two pictures or evaluations of yourself. Your choices include the one offered by your soul or the higher self, which I think of as the voice of God, and the one offered by the ego, or your false idea of yourself. You decide how you view yourself and how you view others as well. Essentially, you accept either ego's picture of yourself and others or that of your higher spiritual self. In every moment of your life, you have the option to choose peace for yourself. The ego wants you in a constant state of agitation to keep you from embracing your higher self. It convinces you that if you are not always on edge, you can't grow. But you must keep in mind that experiencing this inner turmoil is a choice that you have made by allowing your false self to dominate your life. When you make the choice for peace, you are literally allowing God into your life. Learning how to specifically allow the higher part of yourself, rather than your lower identities, to be in control of your life. We all long for the peacefulness of being without turmoil and angst. There is a feeling of an inner glow when we know that we are on course, on our sacred path. So why do we so frequently choose the opposite emotions and thoughts and inner beliefs which agitate our minds and cloud our perceptions and distort our relationships? You need to carefully examine your choices that block your experience of peace, of God. Just knowing that peace is always an alternative is a significant awakening. These tools will help to tame the ego when it demands that you pursue separateness or specialness. Replacing the turmoil that you so often choose is then a simple matter of allowing your higher self to take over in any situation where you are about to allow turmoil to enter. Your ego will push you in the direction of the fight, away from peace. You must be ready to see it as it is about to happen and invite your higher self to send your ego a not wanted right now message. I'm fond of this A Course in Miracles quotation concerning ego replacement. You will not find peace except the peace of God. Accept this fact and save yourself the agony of yet more bitter disappointment, bleak despair and doubt. Seek you no further. There is nothing else for you to find except the peace of God. When you have an absence of peace at any time in your life, know that your ego, the false idea of yourself, is what's really responsible. Keeping in mind that every thought has a physical counterpart, you can see that an ego-produced constant state of tension that comes with proving yourself, hurrying, chattering, worrying, chasing, acquiring, and competing also involves tension in the body. High blood pressure, ulcers, skin disorders, headaches, back pain, and even more serious ailments such as cancer, strokes, and liver disorders are the payoffs for the dominance of the ego. These disorders manifest because you allow ego to create turmoil to avoid the peace that is found within. This awareness of the ego's program should help as you move toward restraining ego and getting to know your higher self. The ego, that false idea that we all have of ourselves, wants to maintain this persistent state of inner confrontation for some very solid reasons. When you understand your ego, you are much more apt to work at restraining it. When you know why your ego behaves as it does, you will then be able to make the adjustments necessary for your higher self to have a greater influence in your life. Here are some of the most obvious reasons why your ego keeps you in this state of turmoil rather than peace. Most important, your ego has been with you since childhood. It has been nurtured by almost everyone you've ever known. Generations of those nurturers have also been dominated by their egos. Your ego wants to survive. If it can keep you in a state of inner turmoil, it will block you from knowing your spiritual self. From the ego's perspective, God is a huge threat, so it will do all that it can to keep you from experiencing that inner peacefulness where God's voice is so beautifully clear. Your ego does not want you to change. The idea of yourself as self-important and special nourishes ego, keeping it healthy and operating at full strength. Even though ego itself is an illusion, just a false idea that you carry around with you, it behaves as if it really had a life of its own. Your ego will make every effort to convince you that you do not need to change. In fact, if you're asking yourself why you shouldn't feel special, you are listening to it right now. These are the kinds of thoughts that have kept you from making the changes leading to inner peace. The ego thrives on fear. When you are afraid, you are at the mercy of the ego. Fear will drive you to behave in ways that undermine your sacred self. Your higher self tells you that there is nothing to fear, that love is the answer to everything, and that God is what love is all about. Your loving presence assures you that you do not need to feel guilty or fearful, and that if you do, it will subside when you experience inner peace. When you experience love within, you have no guilt and no fear. You know that everything you are experiencing is in order, including your woes, which are your greatest teachers, and the death of your body, which is ordained for all the world of the manifest. You know that death is a reward, not a punishment. Therefore you have nothing to fear unless you listen to your ego encouraging fear and dismissing God. Your ego wants you to be on the move, looking for more things to consume and more possessions to own. The more you are on the move in your life, the less time you will have for knowing your spiritual base. Ego cheers you on to stay busy, to keep moving, and to avoid the inner quest where your ego faces restraint. Your ego wants you to face outward. It wants you to continue facing the wrong way so that you cannot experience the presence of God in your life. By facing away rather than inward, you ensure the strong presence of your ego forever. The consequences are that you will continually feel the pressure to compare yourself with others, the need to defeat others in order to feel powerful or even worthwhile, to have more and better toys, to accumulate more trophies. All of this facing outward is the work of the ego. When you refuse to listen, it shouts that you must be upset when others get ahead of you, that you are worthless when you lose, that being number one is more important than anything, that to settle for less is to admit to being a loser. All of these beliefs are deeply ingrained within you. It is very difficult for you to even imagine not having them because the work of your ego and the egos of so many others have been working overtime, convincing you that this is the only way to be. Facing outward brings about a sense of inner conflict and agitation that keeps you pursuing the gold stars that the ego offers. These are a few of the more obvious payoffs your ego uses to keep you in a confrontational rather than a peaceful mood. Keep in mind that you can restrain this ego simply by the power of your own will. All it takes is a determination to live by the dictates of your higher self and a willingness to act on that determination rather than succumb to the easier path of the ego. As I readied myself to make the shift from an exclusively spiritual being into the world of particles in 1939, I had the following conversation with the creative intelligence I'll call God. God, what would you like to accomplish on this journey you're about to undertake? Me, I'd like to teach self-reliance, compassion, and forgiveness. God, are you certain that this is what you wish to dedicate this entire lifetime to? Me, yes, I can see the need even more clearly now. God, well then I think we'd better put your little ass into a series of foster homes and have you stay there for a decade or so, where you'll learn to experience relying upon yourself, and we'll remove your parents so that you won't be dissuaded from your mission. Me, I'll accept that, but what about my parents? Who will best facilitate my life's purpose? God, you can select Melvin Lyle Dyer as your father, a prisoner, an alcoholic, and a thief. He'll abandon you as a baby and never show up in your life. You'll first practice hating him and seeking revenge, but you'll ultimately forgive him long after he's left his body. This act of forgiveness will be the single most important event of your life. It will put you on the path that you're signing up for. Me. And my mother? What about her? Take Hazel Dyer, Lyle's wife. Her compassion for all of her children will give you an example to follow. She'll steadfastly work herself to the bone to reunite you and your brothers after 10 years or so of her own suffering. Me. Isn't it an awful, cruel fate for my father? God. Not at all. He signed up for this 25 years ago. He dedicated this entire lifetime to teach one of his children the lesson of forgiveness. A noble gesture, wouldn't you say? And your mother is here to show you how true compassion shows up every day. Now get down there and participate in becoming a particle. In the introduction of my book, You'll See It When You Believe It, I wrote about finding my father and visiting his grave in the early 1970s. The facts that led me there defy the laws of logic, and visiting it was the final hurdle I needed to overcome before initiating my writing and speaking career, or the mission I'd signed up for back in 1939. I've also visited the Holocaust sites of Europe and read and reread the history of events that contributed to the hatred that created war. In the 1960s, I worked to bring peace to the events surrounding the horrible Vietnam War, and today my attention is often focused on finding an alternative to the violence and hatred in Africa, the Middle East, and particularly Iraq. My calling is deep within me and has a hold on me. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I'm probably being guided by what Spirit and I decided at the inception of this journey. One thing I know for certain is that I'm inspired. I've described my personal insight about my calling to encourage all of you to examine your own life, including all of its travails and success, as a necessary experience in order to fulfill your mission. Looking at life from this perspective nurtures the deep yearning within that will beckon you back to Spirit. As you can see from my own example, it can be a great help to look at your entire life as the unfolding of a plan that you participated in before you even arrived here. By doing so, you shift from blaming others and circumstances to being responsible and feeling your purpose. Whatever shows up in your life then becomes a part of the perfection of this plan. When everything you experience seems unwelcome, for instance, you can search for what you gain from the apparent obstacles. If we can remember that we're responsible for what we're attracting, we can then eliminate the negative energy we wallow in. If what we desire is to be inspired and feel joy, but the opposite keeps showing up, rather than cursing fate, we can view ourselves as simply being out of creative vibrational alignment. We can shift our vibrations in the form of thoughts to those that are more harmonious with our desires, and we can then begin to take the small steps necessary for our inspiration to be sensed. Source energy will cooperate with us when we seek it energetically. Moreover, we can begin to reassess our lives for misaligned attractions and imagined bad luck. When we feel peaceful within ourselves, we begin to attract more of the peace we desire because we're functioning from a spiritual place of peace. When we engage spirit, we regain the power of our ultimate source. Regardless of what goes on in the world of form, inside of ourselves, we'd still be living in spirit. For example, a beggar on a street corner may have agreed to come into this world of boundaries to teach and generate the awareness that leads to more compassion in this world, or even to teach a single person, perhaps you, to become more compassionate. In an infinite universe, there's no time restrictions on how many lifetimes we get. With an infinity before us, spending one lifetime teaching compassion doesn't seem so outrageous. When we feel peaceful within, we begin to attract more of the peace we desire because we're functioning from a spiritual place of peace. When we engage spirit, we regain the power of our ultimate source. An inspirational attitude is less judgmental and more appreciative, with a keen eye for how God or source energy manifests. And remember, source can't be removed from what it creates. Everyone and everything contains God or the source, so be on the lookout for the God force in every living thing. Explore how this force has delivered to us many blessings in disguise. We came from a world of pure spirit and allowed that source to take over without any interference or questioning on our part. As long as we were in spirit, our source materialized in a multitude of ways to handle everything for us. Then, almost immediately after our birth into form, we initiated a program to deny spirit and emphasize the ego. But now, as you listen to these words, you're on the threshold of dropping ego identity and returning to a life where inspiration awaits you. You see, when I resonate to anger, shame, hatred, or revenge, I add to these decidedly non-spiritual energies by joining in what I find to be so objectionable. But when I remember to bring non-judgment, love, tolerance, and compassion to these low, ego-dominated energies, I see how different the world looks, and even how different those around me act in the presence of these God-realized energies. I feel optimistic when I'm in spirit, with an inner knowing that nothing can interfere with an idea whose time is coming or has already arrived. I trust that our Creator knows what it's doing and that good triumphs over what ego believes is bad or evil. I sense that we're all moving toward a world that will no longer know the horrors of war or practice our long-established habits of inhumanity toward our brothers and sisters around the globe, who may have different cultural views and their own unique physical distinctiveness. By staying in spirit, I'm truly inspired to see the potential for greatness that's in all of us as one people, and I turn from anguish to faith that at least I can live from a place of God realization and practice being a force for good. Staying in vibrational alignment with spirit allows me to be more present in all of my life activities. Arriving seems to replace striving, and being in a state of flow is far more common than my old, uninspired state of worry and anguish. I remind myself that spirit is only here and now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, only now. By keeping my vibration aligned spiritually, I see the ecstasy in the present. Everything else that once was a source of worry doesn't come up for me, since the outcomes are already handled for me in my own mind. What will be, I remind myself. The world looks so much more peaceful when I approach it this way, and my ego, which once needed to win at all costs, is relegated to a distant seat in a stadium in another galaxy. The laws of the material world truly do not apply in the presence of God realization. And I know that I have the choice to live at this level of inspiration. When I do so, it seems that the world changes. Animals behave differently than their biological genetics would seem to allow. People at a distance seem to hear me telepathically and respond to my highest thoughts. Objects seem to materialize in defiance of what scientists say is possible. And healing takes place in spite of modern medicine saying otherwise. In other words, miracles seem to be ordinary. The world looks like a place where everything is possible, where restrictions and limitations are non-existent, and where the power of our Creator seems to roll right up and land at my feet, begging me to hop on board and witness the infinite possibilities it offers. This is how I feel when I align myself to Spirit, cocky inside because I know something that so few ever come to realize, but humble and awestruck on the outside at the miraculousness of it all. When I remember to stay in Spirit, I've realized that when one thing appears to be going wrong, I can see clearly that 10 things are going right. For example, if my cell phone isn't working, I can note that my health is fine, my family is safe, the ocean is calm for swimming, my bank account has a surplus, my electricity is fully functional, and so on, and on it goes. From a perspective of being in Spirit, I automatically shift my attention away from what's going wrong and onto what's right. This then becomes my point of attraction, and I attract more of what I'm focused on, whereas at an earlier time in my life, I'd attract more of what was going wrong because that was my point of attraction. How sublimely beautiful the world now looks to me from this magnificent place of inspiration. No longer do I stay focused on and attract more of what's going wrong, for I've learned to place my attention on what's right, what's working, and what's aligned with the all-creating Spirit. From this place of inspiration, I ask, what if I looked deep within myself and found no original sin at all? That is, what if I discovered original innocence instead? What if the same were true for everyone? I know that our creative source is one of good, and I also know that we must be like what we came from. Therefore, everyone, including myself, is a piece of God. We came to this world from innocence and love, not from a place of sin or weakness. When I see Christ consciousness in everyone, even those with whom I differ greatly, I'm able to feel good, to feel God. When I know that there's no original sin in anyone, I'm able to think like Mother Teresa, who told the world, in each person I see the face of Christ in one of his most distressing disguises. When it is goodness that I look for, rather than sin and weakness, that's what I see. I then see goodness in the little old lady driving slowly in front of me, the elderly man fumbling with his change and delaying me at the cashier, the children squealing loudly as I'm attempting to concentrate on a book, the teenagers shouting along with their ear-splitting rap music, or the jackhammer operator whose deafening sounds fill the air with chaos. When I'm inspired, I see God realization, disguised as a minor blip, and the world looks fine, happy, and even peaceful. I remind myself of Rumi's sage advice, if you're irritated by every rub, how will you ever be polished? When I feel inspired, I notice how much zest I have for life and everything that I do. I play tennis with exuberance and without fatigue. I write from my heart, and this inner feeling radiates outward in all of my waking moments. Inspiration means doing what I love, and even more significantly, loving what I'm doing. It's my willingness to bring love and passion to the activities of my life, rather than looking for love to emerge from those events and activities. It's an attitude, and knowing this, I remember to pick a good one as often as possible. I know that being enthusiastic feels good, and I also know that I have the choice to select these attitudes at any and all times. By staying in Spirit, these outlooks on life become second nature to me.
Whenever you're about to act, to do anything, if you have any conflict at all, you can ask yourself the question, is what I'm about to say, is what I'm about to do going to bring me peace, more peace in my life, or is it going to bring a sense of turmoil? Is there going to be some struggle, some anxiety as a result of what I'm going to say or what I'm going to do? If the answer is peace, then it's your highest self. If the answer is turmoil, struggle, anxiety, stress, then the answer is your ego. So now you've identified, and now you know how to act. The way to act is with the way that will bring you peace. Even if it seems inconsistent, the way to act is the way that will bring you peace. The second thing to do is to start to learn to go beyond this restriction that you've experienced in the physical plane. The restrictions of the physical plane are many. Begin to say, I can transcend that, and your mind begin to look at yourself as living in that physical plane, but that's not who you are. So figure out ways in your own consciousness to just get past all of these limitations that are a part of your body and your world. The third is, wherever you go, refuse to defend yourself to anyone or to anything on the earth plane. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to prove yourself. You can just quietly be an effective human being and not get yourself into that position where you're arguing with someone over the rightness of how you feel. Just let go of that. And the higher part of you is saying, I want peace. I want peace. It's always there. Keep that in mind. And finally, learn to surrender and to trust in that wisdom that created you. The act of surrendering is letting go, detaching yourself from all of the beliefs that you have that it's important for you to be right and it's important for you to prove other people wrong and all of these kinds of things that keep you sort of in that restriction. Once you surrender and once you let go, you find yourself a whole lot freer in your life. To understand that you have a higher self and to know it and be aware of it is one thing, but to trust in it is quite something else. And the ways to put this principle into practice are, first of all, to keep in mind that you cannot go to a higher ground if you're hanging on to a lower level. That in order to get yourself to a higher place, a place of trust, you have to somehow recognize that all of the stuff that's going on in your life in a lower place is something you have to let go of. You have to trust that when you do let go, you're not going to be falling into the abyss. And I would recommend that you take a real rebellious attitude toward the philosophy which preaches that that you are not connected to the divine energy, that somehow this force that has many names is something that is outside of you, and you're not deserving of it. Until you know that you can trust in it, you can't use it and acknowledge it in your life. One of the things to do to practice this trust is to take the most serious problem that you have and turn it over to God. Affirm to yourself, I would like to show my trust in the divine force by simply turning my problems over to your divine hands. I can remember doing this with some of the things that I really struggled with at one time in my life, things that I just thought I couldn't get past. I remember going through relationship difficulties. I remember going through problems with drinking and things like this, where it just seemed like I wanted to get past it and I just didn't know quite what to do. I can remember times when I would be stuck in my writing and not sure whether I could, and I would just stop and I would just say, all right, I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to trust. I'm going to trust. I'm going to surrender. And this concept of surrender is very, very important. So when you do this, it's just that simple act of getting down on your knees and staying there on your knees and just say, okay, I'm going to turn this over to something that is higher within myself. And the ego seems to go away and the solution seems to be there for you. The presence of complete trust is evident in your life when you start to think and feel and do are all balanced and they're all in harmony. This is called congruence. If you're congruent, your thoughts and your feelings and your behavior are all in harmony. If you're incongruent, you have one thought about, gee, I'd like to be able to do this, but then you feel another way about it, and then you act in a completely different way. And this is the cause of most of the struggles in our life, and it's also the thing that impedes the free flow of the divine force into your life. You have to trust in yourself. When you're trusting in yourself, you're trusting in this very wisdom that is the source of your life. And when you are congruent within and are feeling congruent, you are also beginning to act congruent. So work on congruency and look at the areas in your life in which you feel yourself to be incongruent. What do I think about this, and how do I feel, and how do I act? And try to bring them into harmony. And you'll start accessing this trust that is absolutely essential to the manifesting process. And of course, as always, you have to begin a meditation practice of contemplating the supreme principle which is beyond the pettiness of this world. And as you meditate and go within and you make conscious contact with God, God isn't something that you know about any longer. God is something that you know directly and personally. And once you have this direct conscious contact, this knowing, then trust is not anything that you'll ever have to work on again.
To change the thought from notice me, to what Lao Tzu calls living in obscurity, becoming more obscure. We live in a celebrity-obsessed world, don't we? Look at me. Notice me. The Tao teaches something completely the opposite. Listen to the 66th verse of the Tao. Water again. The sea stays low. And because the sea stays low, all of the rivers and all of the streams empty into it. Because it stays humble. Because it stays in that place of just allowing everything to come to you. He was trying to teach us the important lesson of letting what we know is coming come to us. Verse 66 of the Tao. Why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Humility gives it its power. That's a very important principle to understand. And I live on the ocean, right next to it. It's my front yard. And always I watch it to learn something from this thing called the ocean, which is the most powerful source of life that we have on the planet. Without it, there's no life on this planet. And because it stays low, so what does this have to say to us? Do you have the capacity to get past that ego need to always be saying, notice me, look how important I am? I mean, there's been a proliferation of this lately with this celebrity silly stuff, isn't it? I mean, CNN is doing, full hour shows on silly little things about what happened to this particular celebrity or what happened to that celebrity, and the celebrity's never even done anything. And there's all of this talk about it. And all of the new magazines. I mean, and you go through an airport and you look on the newsstand and all the same photos, just with different magazines. I don't even know what the names of all of them are, but there's like this huge market now that we have for people to get into a state of notice me, notice me, notice me. And how much do we train our young people, particularly in our schools and so on, that the one who is the star is the one who gets the most attention. The one who is the most important and the most valuable is the one that has the most people liking them and so on. This constant obsession with needing to be noticed. When in fact, what I have found for myself is the happiest moments of my life are when I can do it low and slow and not have anybody out there even know what I'm doing. To be able to, Louise never would have advertised the fact of some of the things I talk about with her generosity. She does it anonymously. It's almost always done in those ways. No, look at me, look and notice me, how important I am and so on. So much to learn from that kind of wisdom, from that kind of inner connection to the Tao, the ability and the willingness to do it anonymously, to say that you can just get done almost anything that you want to get done if you don't become obsessed with taking credit for it. In the 36th verse of the Tao Te Ching, it says, the gentle outlast the strong, the obscure outlast the obvious. Try to become a little more obscure, a little less interfering, a little less notice me, a little less, one of the specific kinds of things that you can do is just as you're about, when somebody else is talking, just as you're about to interject what you've been thinking about for the whole time, waiting for them to stop talking, just stop and to bite your tongue and say, tell me more. Or, that's very interesting. I have never heard that point of view before. Even if they totally, completely disagree with everything that you stand for, to be willing to listen, to be able to stop, practice it. I practiced it when I did these verses of the Tao. I practiced it every single day while I was working on that. Just staying obscure. And for me, that's not always so easy because of just being recognized wherever I go. And if I saw someone who was about to recognize me, I would just put my head down. I would just walk a little bit past them like something. Right now, I just want to be anonymous. Right now, I want to be obscure. The Tao says, storms always end. Verse 23, fierce winds don't blow all morning. A downpour of rain doesn't last all day. Who does this? Heaven and earth. You're already connected to everything you want or need. It will come to you at the exact perfect time as the rivers and the streams come to the ocean at the perfect time and place, you gotta trust. You gotta know it's going to come to you. You don't have to chase after it. You can become a little less obsessed with your ego and your self-importance and who you are and what you've done, and you can get so much more done. And you know what? It's the most peaceful and sweet, delicious way. It's like the song that Cecilia was singing about the rose. Thank you so much, and God bless you.